So this whole afternoon we've talked about connecting. What does connection look like? And connection machine is you're coming up as an audience, because everybody's going to come up and contribute to the connection machine. You're going to do a movement and a sound that connects to another part of the machine. So our actors are going to start us off, and then everybody else from our audience is going to come up and add to this connection machine. You'll listen to my voice, and once everybody's up, we're going to speed the machine up, and then we'll slow it down, and then we will disperse, right? And the machine will come apart, and you'll go back to your seats. And then we'll have some Q&A with the actors afterwards. So first, we're going to have the connection machine start for us. So actors, if you can start our machine up, please. Audience coming up and add to this connection machine. How do you want to connect with everybody today? Come on up, come on up. And if there's not enough room on the stage, you can add on from the ground floor if you'd like. Alright, we're going to speed up our machine. And here it goes. Speed it up. Even faster. Even faster. Even faster. And now let's start to slow it down. Even slower. Even slower. And stop. Very good. Give yourself a round of applause for the connection machine. We would sit in the room quietly and wait for them to have the time to process what they wanted their answer to be, so then they could answer it. And I just remember after our first session, she was like, "Thank you so much for not rushing me to tell you what I needed to say." And so that can be really challenging. For my drama therapy students, they know that I'll ask a question and I'll just sit. I'll just wait, make eye contact until somebody feels ready to say something. It's also important to listen carefully to them, even if what they're saying may not be true or that it may be misguided, right? So when we had Patrick up here talking about, was it Kyle? It was Kyle, right? So we want to listen and make sure that they felt like they're being heard. Also, we want to respect the person's feelings and that their personal values and experiences are valid, even if they're different from your own or if you disagree with them. That can be very challenging, especially when we think of social issues, when we think of political issues, sometimes a lot of those emotions are coming from feeling like they're not being heard, no matter what side they're on. So I say that as in, when I'm doing it, I feel like I can do that and sit in that. If you feel challenged in that situation, then it's very important to be able to talk to somebody about it, so you're not projecting it onto the other person. Next is you want to use the same terminology that the person's using, unless they're using stigmatized language. When it comes to neurodivergence, because I love my neurospicy people. That is a wonderful term that Linnea taught me, is neurospicy. Yes. So neurodivergent is a non-medical term, okay, that describes people whose brains develop or work differently for some reason. So this means that the person has different strengths and different struggles from people whose brains develop or work more typically. And I'm using air quotes because it's typical or normal, right? I look at the whole world and I say none of us are normal. We all have different ways that our brains work. So it is a way to describe people using words other than normal and abnormal, because there's no single definition of normal for how the brain really works. So what is neurodivergent? When we look at different diagnoses, there are varying types, and when you look at the DSM-5 that we have, the giant manual where we do diagnoses from, it's this thick, right? So know that there are many more in this, but these are the ones that you may more readily identify in the workplace. So one is autism spectrum disorder, and this includes what was once known as Asperger's syndrome. And that again is on the spectrum. So people with autism can be very high functioning versus very low functioning, and they're on a spectrum of that. There's also attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. There's Down syndrome. There's dyscalculia, which is difficulty with math. There's dysgraphia, which is difficulty with writing. There's dyslexia, with difficulty with reading. There's dyspraxia, difficulty with coordination. There are varying intellectual disabilities, and then we also lump in all the different mental health conditions like bipolar disorder, OCD, and many more, again in a very thick manual of diagnoses. There's also sensory processing disorders, again various forms of that. There's also social anxiety, which is just a specific type of anxiety disorder, and there's also Tourette syndrome. So again, these are all different ways that our brains can work in a different way. And when I talk about just my own personal ADHD, and then when I compare it to my brother's ADHD, I think about I was the one who just would space out and just think about all these cool things that I want to do. I'd be in school and my teacher would be teaching me, and I'm like, no, I'd rather be thinking about this other story that I'm gonna tell, and then I'm gonna dance it out, and then I'm gonna add it to this little piece with my music, and just like my brain would be elsewhere, and they'd be like, hey, so we're gonna go to page 7, I'm like, fine. And so I'd have to force myself to come back to my wonderful world out here, because that's where my brain wanted to go. Versus my brother, who just basically did that in a physical form. So if you think about him in a dance class, he took a dance class with me one time, and I was just with the choreographer, and I was doing the thing. He literally just ran laps in the room. So that's how we both have different forms, and again, there's different varieties on the spectrum of what that looks like. But the way our brains work, we use it as our superpower. So for me, it's like I come up with really cool ideas, and then I go to my team, I'm like, make this happen, right? But for my brother, he can look at all these fine little details, even his art, and you just like look at all these little pieces and just how he focuses in on something. But then you ask him to clean something up, it's like, ugh. So the brain works very differently. And so because of that, people who are neurodivergent have these superpowers, these wonderful gifts that are often overlooked or not appreciated within the workplace. But if you can find out what those are, you can really just help support them with that, so they feel like, oh, I'm doing something wonderful, and they're doing something wonderful within the workplace, and then it's a whole community that is supporting their strengths. I remember driving my children, who are, the world is opening back, and I'm driving them to school, and I'm making all these comments, and I realized I'm being really sarcastic right now. And I go, girls, has mommy got more sarcastic since the pandemic? And they both in unison went, no, mom. So they both put the sarcasm right back at me. And I remember my sense of humor became very dark also when I was working in an inpatient psych, because we just had to laugh about what we were dealing with on a daily basis. So we just went there. And if anybody else from the outside world were to come in and hear our conversations, they'd be like, are you really in the mental health field? Yes, this is how we cope.